What if I told you a pope hosted an orgy in the Vatican, where 50 prostitutes crawled naked on the floor while cardinals placed bets? And this actually happened. October 31st, 1501. The Papal Palace in Rome. Pope Alexander II's son, Cesare Borgia, throws a party that would become the most infamous night in Vatican history. 50 prostitutes, ordered to strip completely. Chestnuts scattered across marble floors. The women crawl on hands and knees, picking them up while nobles watch and wager on who can perform the most depraved sexual acts. The Pope himself sits in attendance. This wasn't hidden. It was documented by multiple sources. The Banquet of Chestnuts. A single night that exposed the rot at the heart of medieval power. And it's just one scandal. There were knights castrated alive for sleeping with princesses. Kings burned to death at their own parties. Queens who poisoned their families after testing toxins on dying hospital patients. Archbishops murdered inside cathedrals during prayer. Every single story I'm about to tell you is real, documented, and more shocking than any modern celebrity drama you've ever seen. Before we enter the darkest corners of medieval royal courts, hit subscribe. Because these stories, the ones written in blood and buried in church records, the ones that reveal what power really looks like when nobody's watching, they need to be told, and you need to hear them. Paris, 1314. The Seine River flows dark beneath a crumbling tower that locals avoid after sunset. They call it the Tour de Nesle. Whispers circulate about strange comings and goings at night. Shadows moving through archways. Laughter echoing from windows that should be empty, but no one dares investigate. The tower belongs to the royal family. King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, sits on the most powerful throne in Europe. His 3 sons are married to beautiful young women who will bear the future heirs of France. Everything appears perfect. The dynasty seems secure. But beneath the surface of silk gowns and golden crowns, something rotten is growing. Isabella of France, Philip's daughter, and Queen of England, arrives at the French court bearing gifts. She's married to Edward II, a king who prefers the company of his male favorites over his wife. Isabella knows betrayal intimately. She's learned to watch, to notice details others miss. She presents 3 embroidered purses to her sisters-in-law. Margaret of Burgundy, married to Louis. Blanche of Burgundy, married to Charles. Joan of Burgundy, married to Philip. Expensive gifts, distinctive designs, each one unique and unmistakable. Weeks pass. Isabella returns to court for a feast. She's watching the crowd when she freezes. Those purses, the ones she gave to the princesses, she sees them hanging from the belts of 2 knights, Philippe d'Aunay and Gautier d'Aunay, brothers, young, handsome, standing near the royal table, laughing with other courtiers. But the purses don't belong to them. They belong to the wives of the king's sons. Isabella's blood runs cold. She understands immediately what's happening. She tells her father in private. Philip the Fair doesn't react with rage. Not yet. He's methodical, calculating. He orders his spies to follow the knights, to watch the tower, to document everything. What they discover turns his world into ash. Margaret of Burgundy, wife of the heir to the throne, has been meeting Philippe d'Aunay at the Tour de Nesle for months. Blanche, wife of Charles, has been sleeping with Gautier d'Aunay, Philippe's brother. The 3rd wife, Joanne, may not be guilty of adultery, but she knew. She watched. She kept their secrets. The future queens of France have been betraying the crown in a decrepit tower while the kingdom slept. Philip moves swiftly. April 1314. The d'Aunay brothers are arrested at dawn, dragged to the dungeons beneath the Châtelet fortress. The torture begins immediately. They confess under agony, every detail, every night, every touch. The confessions are written down, sealed, presented to Philip's sons, who read the words and realized their marriages, their heirs, their futures are all lies. The punishment will be public. Medieval France doesn't forgive betrayal, especially not when it threatens the royal bloodline. The d'Aunay brothers will die in ways designed to send a message across Europe. And the princesses? Their fate will be worse than death. Because in 1314, a woman who betrays her husband betrays God himself. And for a princess who betrays the future king, there is no mercy, only darkness. The square at Pontoise fills before dawn. Thousands pack the streets. Merchants, peasants, nobles. Everyone comes to witness what happens when you touch a future queen. The Doney brothers are dragged through the crowd on wooden platforms. They're still alive. Barely. The torture masters have kept them conscious. That's important. They need to feel everything. Philippe Doney is pulled to the scaffold first. His brother Gautier is forced to watch. The executioner reads the charges. Adultery with Margaret of Burgundy, wife of Louis, heir to the French throne. The crowd roars. Medieval law is clear. A man who sleeps with a princess doesn't just commit adultery. He commits treason. He poisons the royal bloodline. He threatens the legitimacy of future kings. The castration happens first. No anesthetic. No mercy. The executioner uses a blade heated in coals. The theory is that hot metal cauterizes as it cuts, keeping the victim alive longer. Philippe's screams cut through the morning air. Gautier vomits. The crowd watches in silence. Some cover their children's eyes. Most don't look away. Then comes the flaying. Strips of skin peeled from Philippe's chest and arms. The executioner works slowly. This isn't just punishment. It's education. Every person watching needs to understand what the crown does to traitors. The smell of blood and burnt flesh hangs over Pontoise. Philippe is still breathing. Next, the breaking wheel. Philippe's limbs are tied to a large wooden wheel. An iron bar, thick as a man's wrist, swings down. It shatters his right leg below the knee. Another swing. Left leg. The bones crack like branches. Right arm. Left arm. Each blow is calculated. The executioner avoids the torso and head. Death would be mercy. Philippe screams until his voice breaks. Then he just whimpers. Finally, they hang him. But even now, there's no relief. The rope is positioned to strangle slowly, not break the neck. Philippe dangles, twitching, for several minutes before his body stops moving. Gautier Doney is next. He receives the same treatment. Every step, every mutilation. The crowd watches both brothers die over the course of 3 hours. Their bodies aren't buried. They're displayed on the wheel at the crossroads outside Paris. Crows pick at the flesh. Rain washes blood into the mud. For weeks, travelers pass the rotting corpses and know exactly what they're seeing. The king's justice. But the brothers' deaths are just the beginning. The real punishment is reserved for the women. Margaret of Burgundy, Blanche of Burgundy, and Joan of Burgundy are stripped of their royal garments in front of the court. Their heads are shaved. Medieval society sees a woman's hair as her glory, her femininity, her worth. Taking it is symbolic death. They're not executed. That would be too quick. Instead, they're taken to Château Gaillard, a fortress prison in Normandy. Margaret and Blanche are locked in underground cells. No windows, no light. Stone walls slick with moisture. The cold seeps into bones. Food is delivered through a slot. No human contact. No voices. Just darkness and the sound of their own breathing. Margaret of Burgundy, the most guilty, dies within a year. The official record says illness, but prisoners whisper about screams that echoed from her cell one night, then silence. She was 23 years old. Blanche survives 8 years in that hole. When she's finally released in 1322, she can barely walk. Her skin is pale as paper. Her mind is fractured. She's sent to a convent where she dies 2 years later, aged 30. Joan, the third wife who only kept the secret, receives a lighter sentence. She's imprisoned but eventually pardoned. Her husband Philip becomes king and takes her back. But the others? They're erased. Their names are struck from records. Their children are declared illegitimate. Margaret's daughter, a little girl who might have been queen, is removed from succession. No one knows if she was even Louis's child. The Tour de Nesle stands empty now, but its shadow stretches across French history. King Philip IV dies later that year, aged 46. Some say from grief, others say from guilt. His 3 sons all die young, within 14 years. No male heirs survive. The direct Capetian dynasty that ruled France for over 3 centuries ends. The crown passes to a cousin. England's King Edward III, Isabella's son, claims he has a better right to the French throne through his mother's blood. France refuses. In 1337, the 100 Years' War begins. Millions will die. Entire regions will burn. The map of Europe will be redrawn. All because of 3 purses, 2 brothers, and a tower where secrets became screams. Canterbury Cathedral, December 29th, 1170. Evening prayers echo through stone arches. Monks kneel in twilight. Candles flicker against pillars older than memory. Archbishop Thomas Becket stands near the altar, his back to the entrance. He knows they're coming. His priests begged him to lock the doors. He refused. A church must remain open, even when death walks through it. 4 knights ride through the winter rain. Reginald Fitzurse, William de Tracy, Hugh de Morville, Richard le Breton. They wear chainmail under their cloaks. Swords hang at their sides. They've travelled from King Henry II. Sether's court in Normandy with a single purpose: murder. But this story begins years earlier, when Thomas Becket and Henry were friends. Not just friends, brothers in everything but blood. Henry made Thomas his chancellor in 1155. They hunted together, drank together, laughed at the same jokes. Thomas was brilliant, charming, ruthless when necessary. He helped Henry consolidate power, crush rebellions, and expand royal authority over the church. They were unstoppable. Then Henry made a fatal miscalculation. In 1162, he appointed Thomas as Archbishop of Canterbury, expecting his friend would let the crown control the English church. Instead, Thomas transformed overnight. The man who wore silk and threw lavish feasts began wearing hair shirts. The loyal servant who bent church law for the king became its fiercest defender. Thomas blocked Henry's attempts to try clergy in royal courts. He excommunicated nobles who seized church property. He became everything Henry didn't want. Their friendship curdled into hatred. Thomas fled to France in 1164, fearing assassination. He spent 6 years in exile while Henry fumed. The King of England humiliated by a man he'd made powerful. Finally, in 1170, they negotiated a fragile peace. Thomas returned to Canterbury, but within weeks the conflict reignited. Thomas excommunicated 3 bishops who'd supported Henry. The bishops rushed to Normandy and complained to the king. Christmas Day, 1170. Henry holds court in his castle at Bourges, near Bayeux. He's surrounded by knights and nobles celebrating the feast. Someone mentions Thomas Becket's latest defiance. Henry explodes. Wine and rage mix in his blood. He shouts about the archbishop who's made him a laughingstock. The exact words are disputed by chroniclers. Some say he roared, "What miserable drones and traitors have I nourished in my household, who let their lord be treated with such shameful contempt by a low-born clerk?" Others record the simpler, more famous version, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" He doesn't give a direct order. That's important legally. He just expresses rage and frustration. But 4 knights hear something else. They hear permission. They hear opportunity. They slip away from the feast separately. They don't tell Henry they're leaving. They ride for the coast, cross the channel, and gather at Saltwood Castle in Kent. From there, they plan the murder. December 29th. They arrive at Canterbury in the afternoon, still hoping to avoid bloodshed in a church. They confront Thomas in his chambers, demanding he lift the excommunications. Thomas refuses. He calls them pimps and parasites. The argument becomes a shouting match. The knights storm out to arm themselves properly. Thomas's priests beg him to flee or lock himself in the cathedral. He walks calmly to evening prayers instead. The knights return with swords drawn. They enter through a side door as monks scatter in terror. They find Thomas near a pillar between the choir and the north transept. Fitzurse grabs Thomas's robe, trying to drag him outside so the murder won't desecrate holy ground. Thomas is a large man, physically powerful. He throws Fitzurse back. "You pimp!" he shouts. "Touch me not, Reginald!" News of the murder spreads like plague across Europe. An archbishop killed inside a cathedral during prayers by knights who serve the King of England. The Christian world reacts with horror. Pope Alexander III receives word in Rome and goes pale. This isn't just murder. It's sacrilege. The cathedral floor is still stained with Thomas's blood and brains when the first miracle occurs. A blind woman touches the stones where Thomas died. She claims her sight returns. A paralyzed man crawls to the spot and walks away. The monks, terrified at first, begin collecting Thomas's blood in vials. They mix it with water and give it to pilgrims. More miracles follow. Within weeks, Canterbury becomes a holy site. Within months, Thomas Becket is the most famous martyr in Christendom. Henry II learns what his words have done while still in Normandy. His rage evaporates into something worse: dread. He locks himself in his chambers for 3 days. Refuses food. Some say he tears his clothes and covers himself in ash. He knows what's coming. The political consequences alone could destroy him. Pope Alexander could excommunicate him, releasing his subjects from their oaths of loyalty. England could descend into civil war. Foreign kings could invade under the banner of avenging a murdered archbishop. But Henry fears something deeper than politics. He fears God's wrath. Medieval people believe in divine punishment with absolute certainty. When bad things happen to kings who wrong the church, everyone knows why. Henry's nightmares fill with Thomas's face, the friend he destroyed, the saint his words created. The 4 knights fare worse. Reginald Fitzurse, William de Tracy, Hugh de Morville, and Richard le Breton flee England immediately. They can't return home. Their lands are seized. Their names become curses. Mothers use them to frighten children. Behave, or Fitzurse will get you. The Pope excommunicates all 4. They're spiritually dead, cut off from salvation. Churches refuse them entry. They wander Europe like ghosts. Eventually, they're given a chance at redemption. They must travel to Jerusalem and fight in the Holy Land for 14 years. Some chroniclers say all 4 die there, never returning to England. Others claim they died tormented, seeing Thomas's face in their dreams, hearing his final words echo in their minds. "Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit." One account says Richard le Breton went mad, convinced Thomas's blood still stained his hands no matter how many times he washed them. Henry survives politically through careful diplomacy. He swears to the Pope that he never ordered the murder. Technically true, he just spoke words that 4 knights interpreted as permission. He promises to fund 200 knights for the Crusades. He vows to build monasteries. He agrees to lift restrictions on church courts. Slowly, the Pope's anger cools. Henry remains king. But the guilt never leaves. Thomas is canonized as St. Thomas of Canterbury in 1173, just 3 years after his death. His shrine becomes the most important pilgrimage site in England, richer than any other, more visited than Jerusalem for many Europeans. Kings, queens, and peasants journey there to pray and seek healing. The offerings pile up: gold, silver, jewels, all laid at the tomb of the man Henry's words killed. Paris, 1679. The City of Light hides something darker than anyone imagines. In the mansions of nobles, behind locked doors and drawn curtains, a new fashion is sweeping through high society. It's not jewelry or perfume. It's poison. And the woman at the center of it all sells her deadly wares from a cramped house in the working-class district, where no one asks questions about the screams that sometimes echo through the walls at night. Her name is Catherine Montvoisin, but everyone calls her La Voisin. Fortune-teller, herbalist, seller of aphrodisiacs and love potions. At least that's her public face. Behind the velvet curtains of her consultation room, she offers different services: inheritance powders, widowmakers, succession insurance. The nobility knows exactly what these pretty names mean. Arsenic, carefully measured, untraceable, delivered in tiny vials with instructions on how much to sprinkle in wine, how long it takes to work, what symptoms to expect. But the story actually begins 3 years earlier, in 1676, with a different woman. Marie-Madeleine d'Aubray, Marquise de Brinvilliers. Beautiful, wealthy, respected, and absolutely ruthless. She's arrested trying to flee France with a collection of poison vials in her luggage. Her lover, an army officer named Gaudin de Sainte-Croix, had died 4 years earlier in a laboratory accident while mixing toxic compounds. In his belongings, investigators found love letters from the Marquise and detailed records of their crimes. During her interrogation, the Marquise confesses to murders that shock even the hardened police commissioners. She didn't just kill strangers. She murdered her own father, Antoine Dreux d'Aubray, a high-ranking civil servant. She poisoned both her brothers. Her motive? Inheritance. She wanted their money. But here's what makes her truly monstrous. Before killing her family, she tested her poisons on charity hospital patients. The Marquise would visit hospitals that cared for the poor, bringing baskets of food and drink. She'd pose as a kind noblewoman performing Christian charity. Then she'd watch. She took notes on how long the symptoms took to appear, whether they vomited or convulsed, how much pain they showed, whether they screamed or died quietly. She treated dying peasants like laboratory animals, perfecting her formulas before serving the same dishes to her father at Sunday dinner. Her trial becomes a sensation. All of Paris follows the proceedings. On July 16, 1676, she's subjected to the water torture before execution. Torturers force her to drink 16 pints of water in an attempt to extract more confessions. Her stomach distends grotesquely. She can barely breathe. She admits to dozens of poisoning attempts, including trying to kill her husband multiple times, though he survived. On July 17th, she's beheaded. Her body is burned, and her ashes are scattered to prevent any burial or memorial. The case should have ended there. One murderous noblewoman executed. Justice served. But the police made a terrible discovery while investigating the Marquise's network. Her poisons didn't come from Sainte-Croix alone. He'd purchased ingredients and received advice from suppliers in Paris. When investigators started pulling that thread, they uncovered something vast, terrifying. An entire underground industry of poison merchants, fortune tellers, and fake priests selling death and dark magic to the highest bidders. Gabriel de la Reynie, the Paris police chief, sits in his office reading Lavoisin's confessions and feels his world tilt. He's investigated murders, thefts, riots. But this is different. The documents describe rituals so obscene that priests refuse to read them aloud. And they all involve Madame de Montespan, the woman who shares King Louis XIV's bed and has borne him 7 children. Lavoisin describes the ceremonies in detail. A defrocked priest named Etienne Guibourg performed black masses over Montespan's naked body. She would lie on a makeshift altar in Lavoisin's secret chapel, a dingy room behind a hidden door. Guibourg, dressed in stolen vestments, would place a chalice on her bare stomach. Inside the chalice, the blood of a freshly sacrificed infant. He'd chant prayers backward, invoking demons instead of saints, while Montespan recited her desires. Keep the king's love. Destroy her rivals. Make him blind to her aging beauty. The rituals allegedly began in 1667, when Montespan was just becoming Louise's favorite. She was terrified of losing him. The king was notorious for cycling through mistresses. She wanted permanence. Power. So she turned to Lavoisin, who promised results through supernatural means. The love potions came first. Drops added to the king's wine at dinner. Powders mixed into his food. Ingredients included Spanish fly, dried mole hearts, human bone dust, and menstrual blood. Montespan served these concoctions to the King of France for years. But as time passed and rivals appeared, Montespan demanded stronger magic. That's when the black masses began. Guibourg claimed he performed multiple ceremonies, each more depraved than the last. The infants used in the rituals, some were stillborn, purchased from desperate mothers. Others, according to testimony that was later sealed, may have been killed specifically for these ceremonies. Their throats slit. Blood drained into chalices. Bodies disposed of in Lavoisin's furnace, or buried in her garden. When police finally excavate Lavoisin's property in 1680, they find what the confessions described: human remains, tiny bones, the charred remnants of infants in the ashes of her furnace. Investigators count at least 2,500 bodies, though not all are babies. Some are aborted fetuses. Lavoisin also performed illegal abortions for noblewomen who'd gotten pregnant by the wrong men. Still, the evidence of infant sacrifice is undeniable. The scandal explodes beyond anything France has seen. La Reine arrests suspects by the dozens: fortune tellers, alchemists, fake priests, nobles. The interrogations reveal a network stretching across Paris and into the highest levels of society. Aristocrats had been poisoning rivals, husbands, wives, and parents for years. The Chambre Ardente, a special court lit by torches and candles to symbolize bringing darkness into light, is established to try the accused. Over 3 years, the trials consume Paris. 36 people are executed. Dozens more are imprisoned or exiled. Some die under torture. Others commit suicide in their cells rather than face public execution. Lavoisin herself is burned at the stake on February 22nd, 1680. She's dressed in a sulfur-soaked shirt that will make the flames burn hotter. As the fire is lit, she screams curses and tries to push away the straw and wood with her feet. The executioner uses an iron bar to push her back into the flames. She burns for hours before dying. But one name is conspicuously absent from the execution lists: Madame de Montespan. Despite overwhelming evidence of her involvement, she never stands trial. La Reine presents his findings to King Louis XIV in private meetings. The king reads the testimonies, the descriptions of his mistress lying naked on an altar, while defrocked priests slaughtered infants, the confessions about love potions in his wine and food for over a decade. Italy, late 15th century. The palaces of Rome hum with intrigue. Shadows pass through candlelit corridors, and whispers of death follow the footsteps of the Borgias. This ruthless family, led by Rodrigo Borgia, known to history as Pope Alexander VI, turns the papacy into their private empire. The methods? Bribery, seduction, extortion, and, most feared of all, poison. To others, the Borgias are monsters. To themselves, they're survivors in a world that rewards cruelty. Rodrigo Borgia claws his way to the papal throne in 1492, defeating rivals by buying votes and promising fortunes. He surrounds himself with family: son Cesare, daughter Lucrezia, and a web of cousins, nephews, and loyal henchmen. Power flows from the family, but so does terror. Rome fills with stories of cardinals who meet mysterious, sudden ends. Dinners that become death traps. The Borgias perfect their legendary poison, Cantarella, a pale liquid slipped into wine or food that kills without a trace. Cesare Borgia, a brilliant but cold-blooded soldier, oversees many of these crimes. He invites powerful men to banquets, flatters them, ensures their cups are filled just a little faster than the others. If a cardinal proves too ambitious or wealthy, he might not survive dessert. After a sudden death, the church inherits all of the victim's assets. Cesare uses these funds to finance his private army, conquer Italian city-states, and buy loyalty from dangerous mercenaries. Lucrezia is more than her infamous reputation as a seductress. With charm, intelligence, and an uncanny gift for diplomacy, she becomes a pawn in her family's alliances, married and remarried to secure Borgia interests. But even she is rumored to possess a poisoned ring. Nobles anxious at her presence at banquets, never sure if a warm smile hides lethal intent. Rodrigo, for all his cunning, eventually makes a fatal mistake. In August 1503, after years of orchestrating deaths, he and Cesare share a bottle of wine with visiting cardinals. The bottle has been tampered with, possibly by the family themselves, aiming to kill guests and seize more church wealth. But the poison is mixed poorly. Both Rodrigo and Cesare ingest the toxin. That night, Rodrigo falls violently ill, dying within days. Cesare, barely surviving, wraps himself in animal skins, believing they might draw out the poison. An ancient superstition. The Pope's passing ignites chaos. With Rodrigo dead and Cesare weakened, Borgia enemies rise up and sweep away the family's power. Their lands and riches are seized. Lucrezia flees Rome and builds a new life far from the shadow of her father and brother, never truly escaping the chill of their legacy. The Borgia dynasty becomes a legend, synonymous with poison, corruption, and unchecked ambition. For generations, even the mention of their name sparks fear and fascination. Did they really use Cantarella to kill over a dozen rivals? Did Cesare kill his own brother Juan out of jealousy? Did Lucrezia's ring ever claim a human life at dinner? The answers are blurred between fact and whispered rumor, but one truth remains. In Renaissance Italy, eating and drinking with the Borgias meant taking your life in your hands. The Poison dynasty ruled by the cup, and when poison failed them, their empire crumbled. Their reputation would endure centuries longer than their unchecked reign, a warning to anyone who covets power without conscience. Rome, Halloween night, 1501. The Papal Palace, center of Christian faith, transforms into the scene of a scandal that will echo for centuries. Cesare Borgia, infamous son of Pope Alexander VI, is throwing a party that outdoes every rumor about the corrupt court of the Borgias. 50 prostitutes, hired, groomed, and paid, are ushered into the Great Hall. Everyone who matters is invited, cardinals, noblemen, and the Pope himself. This is not a discreet affair behind closed doors, but an orgy in the open, sanctioned by the most powerful men in Italy. Chroniclers will name the evening the Banquet of Chestnuts. The rules are simple. The prostitutes strip completely nude. Servants scatter chestnuts across the marble floors. The women, forced to crawl, pick up the nuts on hands and knees as the men look on, some placing bets, others laughing or whispering about which woman will win the next round. The spectacle is both obscene and predatory. But the evening's true horror hasn't yet begun. After the game, the party descends into utter debauchery. Candles are snuffed, torches replaced, tapestries drawn to hide the excesses from prying eyes. Cesare presides over the festivities as master of ceremonies, sometimes joining in, sometimes dictating the order of events. Guests compete to see who can have sex with the most women. Prizes, fine gloves, jewels, and gold coins are awarded by Cesare to the most successful participants. It becomes a contest, not just of lust, but of humiliation, dominance, and cruelty. Pope Alexander VI, the spiritual leader of millions, is reportedly present, watching his son's twisted display. He does nothing to stop it. Instead, he encourages competition, laughs with the guests, and offers rewards. Witnesses claim that the Pope, H.S. personal guards, are tasked with maintaining order, if such a word still applies to a night like this. Servants, many just boys themselves, run from group to group supplying wine, replenishing candles, and cleaning up fragments of discarded clothing as the evening rages on. The air thickens with the scent of sweat, alcohol, and perfume. The marble floors become slick, not just with spilled wine, but with the remnants of their grotesque contest. By dawn, the hall is a ruin. Many will later pretend it didn't happen. Painters are quietly paid to erase images from tapestries. Musicians bribed to forget the music they played. Several noblemen involved either die young, vanish from public life, or join faraway monasteries, a vain attempt at penance for what they witnessed and did. Yet the Banquet of Chestnuts is remembered. The Vatican courts, already infamous for scams, intrigues, and poisonings, now bear the stain of a public orgy blessed by the Pope. The event is cited for centuries by critics of papal corruption, attackers of the Vatican's moral authority, and chroniclers of the Borgia family's excesses. Even today, historians debate the details. Some claim exaggeration, a myth spread by rival families to destroy the Borgia legacy. Others point to detailed, consistent records kept by both allies and enemies. But one fact is clear. For one night, courtly power stripped away all pretense. The spiritual center of Europe became a playground for depravity. And the legacy of the Banquet of Chestnuts remains a warning about what happens when absolute power meets absolute corruption, unchecked even by faith or shame. England, late 13th century. The smoke never really clears from the fields and cities of a country obsessed with betrayal. Medieval monarchs know there's only one way to rule. Rule by terror. Every traitor, real or imagined, gets the same fate. A fate that would chill the blood of even hardened soldiers, to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. This was not just execution. This was spectacle, warning, and the monarchy's strongest commandment. Cross the crown, and there will be no mercy, not even in death. The grisly origins of this punishment trace to King Edward I, the Longshanks, determined to stamp out rebellion at any cost. The most infamous victim, Dafydd ap Gruffudd, last independent Prince of Wales. In 1283, Dafydd is captured after years of defying English rule. Edward wants more than Dafydd's death. He wants to erase the very idea of Welsh freedom. The process begins at dawn. Dafydd is shackled and dragged by horse through mud, dung, and jeering crowds, from his prison cell to the place of execution. His flesh is torn by the stones and filth of the road, but what follows is worse. At the gallows, Dafydd is hanged, held until near death but never allowed to pass out. Executioners revive him, making sure his terror and pain are complete. Next, they draw him. Slit open his abdomen while he still breathes, pull out his entrails, and burn them in a brazier before his eyes. The smoke, stench, and agony would drive most men into madness. For those still clutching life, there is a final ordeal. Dafydd's heart, the seat of his will, is ripped from his chest. Only then does he die. But even death brings no dignity. His body is cut into 4 quarters. One piece sent to York, another to Bristol, another to Newcastle, another to London, carried down the highways or mounted on spikes above the city gates. Heads loom over the Tower Bridge or Blackfriars, staring down at the living as a warning. This is the fate of traitors. It's not just royal justice, it's ritual humiliation set in stone and steel. Others follow. William Wallace, Scottish hero turned rebel, suffers the same horrors in 1305. Dragged through London streets, hung until nearly dead, disemboweled, and emasculated while crowds cheer, his head boiled and mounted above London Bridge. Confessors and chroniclers tell of the same hollow silence that follows such acts. Not defiance, not mercy, not even hate, just fear. The crown rules by mutilation. The message is clear. Every man, woman, and child who sees those gruesome relics knows there are things worse than death. The monarchy's grip is unbreakable as long as these rituals continue. And the memory of this terror lingers in the bones of city walls and the nightmares of the next generation. In medieval England, the king's word is absolute. Should you ever think to rise against him, remember, the human body is not inviolable, and history belongs to those willing to tear it apart to hold on to a throne. England, 16th century. The law is supposed to be a shield, a way for the innocent to defend themselves. But here, the system turns that shield into a weapon. If you're accused of a capital crime and refuse to plead guilty or innocent, the court cannot proceed. The loophole, a punishment so cruel it's nearly forgotten by history. Peine forte et dure, the sentence of being pressed to death. It begins in near silence. The condemned is stripped and laid flat on the cold dungeon floor, limbs outstretched. Iron weights, one by one, are placed on their chest and abdomen. A slow building agony that forces every breath into a struggle. At first, it's bearable. The weight is heavy, uncomfortable, but not yet lethal. But hour by hour, the agony escalates. Prisoners, hoping for mercy, are told they can end their pain simply by entering a plea. Plead and face trial, risking property and family. Stay silent. Endure the pressure. Officials sometimes add sharp stones beneath the victim's back, multiplying the torture, making every muscle and bone scream for release. The body resists with instinct. Lungs fight the pressure. Ribs creak and crack. Face flushes from suffocation. The goal isn't just punishment, it's confession. Authorities claim it's the only way to ensure justice, force a plea, or squeeze the life out slowly. One woman becomes infamous for her sacrifice. Margaret Clitheroe, a devout Catholic in Protestant England, accused of harboring priests and refusing to comply with religious laws. she's offered a chance to protect her children's inheritance. If convicted, her lands will be seized. But a loophole exists. If she stays silent and dies under torture, her estate passes to her family unharmed. She chooses the stone, the press, the slow death. Her final words are prayers, muffled under the shifting weight, hoping her refusal will protect the innocent. Death comes slowly, sometimes after hours, sometimes after days. Ribs snap, lungs collapse. The audience, often only jailers and a handful of officials, watch for any sign of surrender. Sometimes, in rare instances, the victim pleads with a single word and is lifted, gasping, from under the stones. But for most, the only relief is silence, final and absolute. When the body falters, officials remove the weights, dispose of the corpse, and close the case. Pressed to death for silence. This horror reveals the cold logic of medieval justice. Laws built to protect can shatter the human body for a technicality. Families can be saved only if someone is willing to sacrifice everything. The memory persists, buried under more public tortures. But in cold stone and silent deaths, the monarchy sends a message. Even silence can be punished, and justice is never equal for those who refuse to play by the rules. Paris, 17th century. The candlelit salons of the aristocracy radiate splendor, but beneath the gold and silk simmers a lethal paranoia. Anyone might serve you poison. Anyone might steal your life for love, power, or inheritance. Nobles whisper of a string of mysterious deaths. Husbands collapse at banquets. Mothers die agonizingly after breakfast. Fortunes transfer overnight. The cause? Poison. The tool of cowards and desperate dreamers, perfected by the hands of the ambitious. Nobody embodies this fear more than the infamous Marquise de Brinvilliers, whose crimes shock all of France. Marie-Madeleine d'Aubray is beautiful, wealthy, and unassuming. Or so her victims believe. She's obsessed with inheritance. Even family bonds mean nothing compared to gold. Her methods are grotesquely meticulous. Before targeting her own father and brothers, she tests her formulas on the bodies of Paris's poorest. Patients in charity hospitals. She walks the cold corridors, observing symptoms as peasant after peasant writhes in agony. Each death is a note in her research, refining her poison's pain, discretion, and efficacy. Her accomplice, Gaudin de Sainte-Croix, helps develop untraceable combinations of arsenic and herbs. Their secret is not the poison's lethality, but the subtlety of its symptoms. Tremors, fevers, slow collapse. When her father Antoine collapses at dinner, the cause remains a mystery. When her brothers fall ill at separate homes, no one suspects until letters and vials are discovered in Sainte-Croix's laboratory after his own accidental poisoning. The trial that follows is infamous for its cruelty. Brinvilliers undergoes the water torture, forced to drink 16 pints at once, her body bloating, her will finally breaking. She confesses to every crime, even covering up attempted murders that failed. Her execution is public, a brutal beheading, followed by burning at the stake to ensure no relics remain. Crowds gather, some cheering her suffering, others stunned that such horror could be borne in aristocratic salons. Yet the Marquise is far from alone. Thousands are implicated in the affair of the poisons. Nobles, priests, even members of the royal family. Fortune-tellers, like Catherine Montvoisin, supply vials of death to anyone who pays. The police uncover a market of murder. Rich wives rid themselves of abusive husbands. Skeptical children protect inheritances from their aging parents. Servants with access to kitchens become feared for their proximity to power. Each poison or powder carries a recipe, a rumored antidote, and stories of women who wield chemicals as weapons when swords or daggers would be too obvious. Medieval and Renaissance courts are changed by this wave of paranoia, suspicion entering every toast and every gift. King Louis XIV employs official tasters, but even he cannot fully protect himself. Montespan, his mistress, is implicated in bribing priests and poisoners. The affair sparks stricter laws, mass arrests, and public executions. But the real legacy is psychological. Poison becomes the dark art of social climbing, the whispered solution for problems too shameful or dangerous for the law to solve. In the span of a few decades, hundreds are dead and thousands live in terror. Once, nobility ruled by birthright and strength. Now they fear shadows at every feast, a cold reminder that a single cup, carelessly sampled, could end dynasties in silence and leave nothing but a rumor behind. England, 16th century. Death, brutal, public, and humiliating, awaits not only traitors, but wives who dare to rise against their husbands. Crime and punishment are tightly bound. Murder is a horror, but for a woman to kill her husband is petty treason, a betrayal deemed worse than regicide. For these women, there is one singular destiny: death by fire. Alice Arden of Faversham stands as a chilling example. Married to Thomas Arden, a former mayor with a reputation for controlling, ruthless behavior, Alice grows desperate. Her marriage is joyless, suffocating, and ripe for revenge. She turns to her lover, Mosby, and a ragtag crew of accomplices, servants, relatives, even strangers, plotting murder with the meticulousness of a play's script. Everything is planned to the last detail, but nothing goes right. Failed poisons, clumsy stabbings, bungled attempts in public and private. Yet Alice's hatred never wavers. Eventually, she succeeds. Thomas is killed in his own home, stabbed and left in a pool of blood, his body dragged and hidden until neighbors grow suspicious. Once discovered, Alice has nowhere to run. Medieval English law descends on her with full fury. As a wife committing treason, her punishment is burning at the stake. This, the ultimate horror, is reserved for women who kill husbands, not only for the act itself, but for the violation of patriarchal order. Alice is led through the streets, jeered and spit upon by neighbours she once greeted on market days. Bound to a stake at Canterbury, she may hope for the strangler's cord, a thin mercy intended to kill before the flames can. If the executioner fails, as sometimes happens, she dies slowly, inhaling smoke and feeling fire lick her skin until it claims her. Her accomplices are hanged, but Alice's death is meant to be a spectacle. The message is clear. Her betrayal is not simply a crime, it is an affront to all of society. Vorm. Onlookers are reminded how fragile the shield of marital obedience is, how quickly vengeance can turn domestic bliss into something grotesque. The fire eats her flesh, her ashes blown away, leaving behind a cautionary tale written in agony. The burning at the stake is not a relic reserved only for Alice. Across centuries, dozens of women meet this fate, their bodies subjected to flames to warn others. Some are granted mercy, decapitated or strangled before the fire truly burns. Others suffer the full torment, witnesses describing the horror in detail. Faces twisted, bodies coiled, the sickly sweet scent lingering in city squares long after flame and crowd disappear. By the end of the medieval era, the law's cruelty begins to fade. Burning at the stake becomes less common, a symbol of punishment too grim even for the most vengeful states. But the lesson endures. Power and violence are not reserved for kings and queens. Even the homes of ordinary people could erupt into murder and inferno. Alice Arden, crime and grisly death remain forever. One more proof that in the shadow of the throne, nobody is truly safe from the reach of medieval justice. Paris, January 28th, 1393. The city shivers beneath a blanket of frost, and inside the royal palace, King Charles VI of France seeks a way to banish winter gloom. The court is restless, tempers flare, and whispers of madness, Charles's own growing instability, circulate among courtiers. To lift spirits, the Queen organizes a grand masquerade, the Bal des Ardents, the Ball of the Burning Men. No one suspects that night will end in flames, terror, and a legacy of trauma that will haunt the monarchy for generations. 6 dancers, including the king, don Wildman costumes woven from linen soaked in pitch, resin, and wax. Their bodies, hair, and masks are smeared to create an unearthly appearance for the entertainment. The notion is simple fun. Masked savages burst forth during the banquet to surprise guests, dancing with primitive energy, a living tableau. But the costumes are wildly dangerous, their flammable mix a disaster waiting for even the smallest spark. As music echoes and glasses clink, Charles' brother, the Duke of Orléans, arrives late. The hall's windswept corners are dim, and in a moment of careless bravado, the Duke lifts a torch high to see better. The flame catches a dancer's sleeve. Within seconds, fire leaps from figure to figure. Screams erupt as 5 men, trapped by their own costumes, become human torches. The resin fuels an inferno. Flesh blackens, wax liquefies, linen burns until nothing but bone remains. Guests scramble in panic, upending tables and trampling drapes. The king himself is engulfed, flames crackling over his arms and legs. Royal courtiers rush to save Charles, tearing at fabric and beating burning limbs. Miraculously, the Duchess of Berry throws herself over the king, snuffing the fire with her own dress and hands. Charles survives, scarred, traumatized, and forever changed by the horror. The other dancers perish, their agonies witnessed by nobles and servants alike. The court will never forget their dying screams. The aftermath is a court obsessed with fear and guilt. The Bal des Ardents becomes legend, cited in every palace scandal for decades. Chroniclers and playwrights frame the disaster as divine warning, punishment for indulgence, for ignoring the perils hidden behind ritual and revelry. Charles VI, who before had been eccentric, slides rapidly into madness. He begins to believe he is made of glass, fears breaking from a touch, suffers hallucinations and violent rages. Grief and paranoia ripple outward. The French monarchy weakens, divided by mental illness, fear, and the shame of public spectacle. The ball, meant to chase winter away, unleashes a new era of darkness. The court is marked for life. What should have been a night of joy ends in fire, and in the ashes, the seeds of instability and tragedy are sown for an entire generation. Florence, late 15th century. The Medici family, once the backbone of Florence's prosperity and the patrons of Renaissance genius, controlled the most powerful financial operation in Europe. Their marble halls gleam with paintings, scholars recite poetry in their salons, and politicians kneel to their influence. But beneath the surface of opulence and culture, cracks begin to grow. Money and power breed corruption, and greed seeds the collapse of a dynasty once seen as untouchable. The Medici Bank is no ordinary operation. Branches reach from Florence to Rome, London, and Bruges. Nobles, princes, and even popes entrust fortunes to the family's quiet ledgers. The Medici system is built on trust, a fragile currency in an age where alliances shift with the wind. Everything depends on shrewd investments, wise lending, and absolute control. For decades, the family thrives, extending loans to kings and kingdoms, collecting interest, and cementing power. But fortune is fickle. Piero de' Medici, nicknamed Piero the Unfortunate, inherits leadership and proves disastrously unsuited. He offers reckless loans to French and English kings fighting expensive wars, debts that go unpaid as monarchs fall or flee. The family's investments collapse. In desperation, some Medici managers embezzle from the city's treasury, hoping to restore accounts before disaster strikes. The most shameful act comes when funds intended for impoverished Florentine girls, meant to provide dowries for their marriages, are stolen to pay off foreign debts. Rumor and scandal rise. Merchants whisper in the squares. City leaders grow suspicious. The Medici scramble to conceal losses, forging documents and shuffling coins between accounts. But the collapse is inevitable. In 1494, King Charles VIII of France invades Italy, and chaos erupts across the peninsula. Florence revolts against Medici rule, and Piero, disgraced, powerless, flees the city under cover of night. The once mighty family is exiled, their palaces raided, their treasures seized. The bank dissolves almost overnight. Accounts vanish into the hands of creditors and bitter rivals. The impact is immediate and devastating. Families who trusted Medici fortunes lose life savings. Rival banking houses scavenge the ruins. Artists and philosophers who depended on Medici patronage scatter across Europe in search of new benefactors. The city's economy buckles, and an era of artistic brilliance stumbles into uncertainty. But the legacy of the collapse is more than financial. The Medici family, a symbol of power built on calculated risk and constant reinvention, falls because they forget caution and embrace corruption. In their downfall, Florence learns a lesson that echoes down the ages. Even the greatest dynasties can unravel in a single generation if they serve greed before wisdom. Those who build empires on gold must always remember, the house of coins is fragile, and one crack is enough to bring everything crashing down. London, 1395. Beneath the shadow of the great cathedral, city officials stumble upon a scandal that will shake every assumption about medieval society. They arrest a person found in an alley with a man, engaged in an act so shocking it must be brought before the mayor. The accused gives his name as John Reichener, but most know him as Eleanor, an expert in embroidery who charms both women and men. A figure who slips through the city's boundaries of gender and class like a ghost. Reichener's story is one of double lives and blurred identities. Dressed as a woman, he earns a living on the streets, working as a sex worker who caters not only to men, but also to nuns and well-bred ladies. The court records, miraculously preserved amid centuries of fire and flood, reveal hours of questioning. The officials want facts. How long has this been happening? Who are his clients? Reichener answers with shocking specificity, listing clergymen, married women, and high-ranking nobles among his regulars. He describes encounters in churchyards, private rooms, and even convents, making clear that medieval London hid far more than grimy alleys and plague carts. The scandal is bigger than any single arrest. Reichener's testimony exposes an underground world, a network of people sidestepping the rigid lines of gender, sexuality, and social rank. Nuns pay for his services to escape the confines of their vows. Priests risk their souls in moments of passion. Wealthy merchants sneak away from their families to seek out forbidden pleasures. Everything is transacted in whispers, coins exchanged beneath candles, secrets kept by silent agreement. City officials are flummoxed. The prevailing laws have little to say about this new kind of crime. Is Reichener a criminal for cross-dressing, for prostitution, or for deceiving upright men? The answers are unclear, and the court record dissolves into confusion. Ultimately, John, or Eleanor, is released, the officials unable or unwilling to confront a network that implicates so many powerful figures. The scandal quiets, not with justice, but with silence. The legacy, though, persists in city memory. Chroniclers, moralists, and legal scholars revisit the Reichener case for decades, using it to warn of the dangers lurking beneath London's respectability. But for those like John, living in disguise, navigating law and desire, the story is a rare glimpse of agency, survival, and complexity in a world that rarely offered such opportunities. The arrest exposes not just a single transgression, but a labyrinth of secrets, passions, and power moves that define medieval urban life. Reichener's tale is not about punishment, but visibility. He becomes a figure of fascination, the first documented cross-dresser in English legal history, proof that behind the censors and city walls, medieval life was far more complicated, daring, and alive than the chronicles ever dared admit. History is not simply gossip in grand costumes. It's the living record of power, pain, and the choices that shaped whole nations. Medieval royal scandals, betrayals in the Tour de Nesle, poison parties at the heart of Paris, kings executed with horrifying spectacle, and orgies held under the Vatican's glowing candles are not relics to gawk at, but warnings carved into the bones of civilization. Every dark moment left its mark on laws, borders, and even family names. What says remarkable is not just the scale of agony and secrecy, but how these scandals reshaped society. The Tour de Nesle affair triggers the fall of a dynasty and unleashes the 100 Years' War, a conflict that redraws the maps of Europe and buries millions beneath banners of revenge. The affair of the poisons reveals a France where paranoia rules. Nobles hire tasters, trust disappears, and whispers become as dangerous as daggers. The Borgia family's reign of murder poisons the papal legacy for generations, making the Vatican forever a symbol of earthly vice as much as spiritual authority. Justice, too, is twisted by these horrors. Hanged, drawn, and quartered becomes a performance meant to silence rebellion with terror. Pressing people to death for silence, burning wives alive for treason. The rituals of pain are carried out not just for vengeance, but to write fear into public memory. At the same time, Stories like John Reichener's expose invisible worlds, those who found freedom and identity between the cracks of the system, shaping hidden lanes of rebellion. These scandals do not fade quietly. DNA evidence in royal lines reveals the consequences of incestuous marriages. Historical records show how families collapsed under the weight of their secrets, how pandemics and wars were started by royal rivalry or personal revenge. Tales of forbidden love, poison, and betrayal find descendants in today's politics, celebrity culture, and even tabloid headlines. A persistent echo of humanity's hunger for both power and meaning. But medieval scandal offers more than mere shock value. By shining light on corruption, cruelty, and the desperate acts committed to escape fate, these stories force us to ask who benefits from silence, who suffers when justice is replaced by spectacle, and how royalty's failures can teach ordinary people about strength and spirit. In every secret, a lesson hides, sometimes grim, sometimes painful, always vital. The medieval ages are long gone, but their darkest secrets pulse beneath the foundations of the present. Kings may have vanished, queens may have faded, but scandal lives on as a force that shapes families, communities, and nations. Beneath every royal tomb, a shadow remains, not just of an individual undone by greed or love, but of the world forever changed by a moment nobody was supposed to see.